Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is a round 1 game from the 2016 Bilbao Masters Final between Magnus Carlsen playing on the white end and Hikaru Nakamura. So let's dive right in and see what would happen in their 31st classical encounter. E4 by Carlsen, Sicilian on board, a flexible move 2, knight e2, allowing for some different white setups depending on black's next couple moves. In the game, d6, knight c3, and a flexible, non-committal a6 waiting move. Waiting for what? Waiting to see white's fourth. Will it be d4 or something else? In the game, it was something else. g3, and only after g3, g6. Notice the importance of making a flexible, waiting, universal type move on this move 3 with a6. If there's the more committal move g6, white can go straight in for d4, and what do we have? A Sicilian dragon. A far less common opening, at least at the very top level. Far less common than, let's say, a Sicilian Najdorf. A Sicilian Najdorf can spring about after a6. If d4 is played now, that is exactly the road we go down. Instead, after a6, it's g3, g6, both sides fianchetto. White gets in d4 while he can. Castling would allow knight c6, and how are you getting in d4? So d4 right now, cd, knight d. Both sides complete kingside development. And now b3. White looks to exchange off what I consider to be black's most valuable minor piece, for as long as the queens are present at least, and that is the dark square bishop. Both of these bishops, the fianchettoed bishops, are, in my eyes, the most valuable minor pieces. So without them, the king is much more vulnerable. Knight c6, knights are exchanged. Bishop b2, to be expected. Queen a5 looks for a light square bishop exchange. A queen transfer to h5, coupled with bishop h3. White opens the bishop's eyes. Bishop g4, queen e1. Offering a queen exchange. Black declines. Computer views this as best, with the knight d7, and this endgame, if there's some pull, it's maybe for white. Where is there an advantage, if any, or where is there potentially an advantage? I believe that is something related to pawn structure. White may try to create some type of pawn exchange and create an accessible target. Maybe one day if these guys are exchanged, maybe this is something that can, something that white can bite at. It's not an advantage one way or the other related to pieces. It's something related to structure, creating or trying to at least create some kind of target within one another's structure. And I believe it is white who could really be the side. If there is one side that could maybe inflict some target within the other's structure, it's white doing so to black. We don't have the queen exchange. Instead, queen h5, and now f3. This is a very committal move, bit of a surprising move. It weakens the king along the diagonal and rank. This is really the best hut for the king in f2, g3, h3, or even h2 structure. But as soon as you touch the f-pawn, as soon as he's moved 1 or 2 squares, king is far more vulnerable, especially with the queen still on board. But white has his idea, and it's one related to sidelining the black queen. There is a much less committal move on this move 14, one that keeps the pawn still on f2, and instead e5. This is another direction black white can go in, looking to exchange off a couple pawns, welcome a queen exchange, and enter an ending where there are a couple targets for white to bite at. It's not a direction white goes in. It goes for a much more committal plan. With first f3, the queen is restricted, so one of the ideas, just in general, once you identify one of your opponent's pieces as being restricted or having a defensive role, you look to kick it around, try to deflect it from its task. In this case, the queen has to watch over the bishop. g4. Queen h6 is an only move. Queen is guarding h4. And now we have rook a to d1. This may be tempting, right? But there is queen takes pawn, and the bishop is pinned. So you can't continue to attack the queen with g5, but what may be tempting at this point is bishop to c1. This was not played in the game. Again, rook a to d1 was played. But let's just consider bishop c1. g5 is a necessity. And what would you do here? It's an important moment, maybe an interesting pop quiz. What might you do in this position? Seeing that the queen now is overloaded, it's to watch over both bishop and pawn. So would you take here? And after queen takes bishop, take here next and be up a pawn? Or would you take here and after queen takes on h3, take the g5 pawn? If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, see what move you would do, or maybe your choice would be none of the above. Let me just point out now what the worst move would be, in my opinion at least, and it would be to give up the dark square bishop. You're up a pawn, it's true, as white, but opposite color bishops, that isn't so much of a factor to be down a pawn. It's more related to who can better put to use their bishop. And as it stands right now, white has some serious dark square weaknesses on the king side. And on top of that, it's one that could be exploited right away with knight h5, taking advantage of the pin, and he will soon be a beast. That wouldn't be a good choice. And going in for this, well, it's now super messy. Knight takes g4, striking at the rook. The king is really being robbed of his pawn defense. Bishop takes rook, queen takes, king f2. He's running for his life. There is no queen takes bishop because of the pin. But after f6, bishop e3, we have a very unbalanced, scary position for white, where he has two minor pieces, but a king that is without any shelter. Whereas black, he has a rook and two pawns in exchange for that. Okay, the short story here is that bishop c1, white doesn't go straight in for that. But after rook d1, now this is back on. That variation I showed with bishop takes rook is no longer there. Rook d1 gets out of the bishop's way, and this is now something that's on the cards. Black plays first g5, bishop c1. So this is now a threat to take and then take. So black frees up the queen, we can say. She doesn't have to watch over the bishop anymore. King takes bishop. And now queen g6, getting out of this pin. h4. And g takes h4. I must admit, when I'm skimming through a game, initially, one of my first reactions as black when I saw h4 was, okay, well, let's maintain this pawn on g5 to keep a grip over the f4 square. Let's play h6, in other words. Takes. It's important to not be of that, to not be in that frame of mind in this position. There is a much bigger factor going on in this position. And it involves the king positions. Let's not forget. We're trying to checkmate one another's king. Let's consider king safety here. Okay? What we have now, if this came about with h6 takes and then the recapture, we have a completely open h-file. And who's going to be quicker to make use of that? Whose king is maybe a bit more vulnerable, actually? The king is already on g2, and there can be a very quick transfer along the h-file. White can maybe put to use, in other words, the h-file, and get at the black king. Maybe even having the rook pivot on h5 one day. So this is one of the reasons, I believe one of the main reasons why black is just capturing on h4. One thing here is that you don't have to worry about a bishop takes pawn move. You are getting rid of, with this capture, you are getting rid of the heart of the king side, of black's king side pawn structure, but how good, how valuable, or how defensive a pawn is a pawn on g5? It's different if he's on g6, but a pawn on g5, I don't know what kind of great defense he's really putting up for the black king. So we have that capture, and white recapturing, and another way to view it is that without a black pawn on g5, there is this pawn on g4 who is now pinned. He's maybe a little bit more vulnerable without a black pawn on g5. The white king, a little bit more vulnerable without a black pawn on g5. d5. At this point, I believe it is the white king who is more vulnerable. This is why black is seeking some pawn exchanges, looking for some open files, some open diagonals. d5, and now g5. Not quite sure about the d5 move. It's not considered the best try here for white. It's not threatening the knight, but the idea that white has in mind is to meet d takes e, the game move, with f4. This is what was played, where white is giving up a pawn and trying to keep the position somewhat closed. A better try, the computer says, is something like e5 and then f4. This allows queen takes pawn, but this is actually holding as an even evaluation. Queen e4, king g1, it may be, maybe there's something to do over here on the h-file. Okay, having an e5 and f4 structure, and this structure here kills the bishop, and this knight offsets the knight on d6. It's really only the queen, for the moment at least, who is a bit of an annoying piece to white. But that's just one piece. Black still has to find a way to get another piece involved into an attack against the white king. Short story, instead of g5, the computer is recommending e5 with then f4. In the game it was g5, d takes e, f4. So with this, white is now down a pawn, but does not really have compensation for it. Looks for f5 next, but that's stopped cold with e6. c4. Black gets on an open file and goes with the f-rook. One of the ideas is to next play knight e8, look for a knight reposition. At any moment the white king can move, and then this will be a threat. So black takes this into account, knowing that the knight on f6 is, or the f6 square I should say, is not a stable square. So going with this rook is best. If you go with the other rook and the knight wants to go here, well, there's now a disconnect between the rooks. Rook f to e8, knight e8 right away. Just looking to reposition. f5 is a fantastic square. It is also for the moment defending e4. Queen f2, and now f5. This is freeing up the knight, so he no longer has to defend e4. Black now has a pawn there to defend a pawn, and quite an asset is the e4 pawn. He is connected and passed. Bishop b2, knight f7. Black now looks to undermine this structure. Knight f7 is facilitating an e5 pawn break. Dark square bishops are gone. It is the white king who is still more vulnerable than the black king. Queen G3, an idea for black at this point can be to take advantage of the pinned pawn on G5 with H6. So Queen G3 unpins. Black simply looks to double on the only open file. One pair of rooks are exchanged. Queen C3, King G8, Rook F2. If the queens weren't on the board, if king safety wasn't an issue, the knight on C5 would be a very good piece. We can see this pawn picked up, and white can look to just push the A pawn. But as it stands right now, the white king, his house is on fire. There are these pieces that are swarming in, and there is no time, to just go pawn grabbing. This knight on C5 almost always stands well, but in a way, he's kind of an out-of-play piece. Pretty rare, but I believe that is the case here. Queen H5, let me be a bit more specific. Pretty rare for a knight to be in this hole on C5 and for him to be out of play, but in this case I believe he is. Queen H5, trying to get the queens off is white. Black declines. White has the more vulnerable king. Queen E3. E5 is not only striking here, but looking for Rook G6. Some lateral movement. Queen G3. Rook G6. Takes. We have check. We repeat this position a little bit. There is a time control at move 40, which is now met. So players gain some time at this point. And now black comes up with the idea to take on G5, tuck the king away on H6 temporarily. It may be tempting at this point to do something like this, but there's a mate in 2 threat, knight H3, and Rook G1. If the king went in the corner, same story. So while tempting this pin, it's no good because of knight H3. Queen F4 pins the knight. And now we have a little 2-move reposition of the black queen by way of D1 and then D4. Fewer pieces on board, the more valuable the queen is on these center squares. D4. What isn't she doing from D4? Striking at the knight, striking at the rook, restricting the queen as a result, and she even has some defensive task of shielding the king against diagonal checks. As we will soon see, the king's going to take up a post on H8, and the queen will be there to guard the dark squares. B4 defends the knight. King G7. Now the rook is ready to get involved along the H file. What's tried is Queen C7. King H8. Queen C8, the rook blocks. Queen takes pawn. Now the knight is hitting there with check. Just an enormous piece. Do a knight comparison. Again, he's out of play, and he is well within play. This is already leading to checkmate. King H3, Queen D6. It goes no further. After Queen D6, white resigns. 2 mate threats. Queen G3 and Queen H6. No good way to parry these threats. Carlsen resigns. For the first time in their 31 encounters total now. 12 losses, 18 draws, and now 1 win. He got the monkey off of his back for the first time, so we'll see how maybe things change in future encounters. Feel free to leave any feedback. Let me know what you think, how maybe this will, again, influence future encounters. We had an interesting decision made earlier in this game with that F3 G4 idea. Feel free to share any thoughts you have on this game. I look forward to reading the comments, as usual, and I hope you got something out of it. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.